Hey everyone, and welcome to section 2.2. And in this video, we're going to talk all about VS Code, how WPILib integrates with VS Code, and give you a general overview of some of the pre-generated components that comes when making a brand new robot project in VS Code. So let's get started. So the first thing that you'll want to do is open up WPILib VS Code. Now, if you're a little bit stuck on how to, find that, if you go to your search window and type in your year, in this case it's 2024, if I type in 2024 and then WPILib VS Code, it'll pop up and then you can open it like that and pin it to your taskbar after. So once you open it, you'll get something that looks like this, or you might have the brand new introduction window, it does not matter. And the first thing that we are going to do is explore this sort of red button here. So if you've used VS Code before and you're familiar with code, you'll know that, well, okay, this kind of looks the same, right? So what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is with this guy, right? This is the WPILib command palette, and this is responsible for doing all the robot-specific things like uploading code, building code, making sure it compiles, creating a new project, all of that, right? So what we're going to be, and now if you don't want to hit that red button all the time and you want to be fancy and use a keyboard shortcut, you can type in Control-Shift-P and you'll get the same window up, alright? So the first thing that we're going to do is explore how to make a new project, and then we're going to upload that project to GitHub. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is hit Control-Shift-P and then type in new. And then the thing that'll pop up, or hopefully that should pop up, is create a new project. Now, you might have to type in new project in order for it to fully pop up, but go ahead and click that. Now there we go. We've got the WPILib new project creator. So that's exactly where we want to be, right? So we're gonna go ahead and select a project type. And the first thing that it's going to be is a template. Now, this is not like a template. You mean like it's going to write code for me? No. This is just going to give you a file structure that you can use to start typing out your code. So we're going to go ahead and hit template. Then it's going to be Java, right? Because this course is in Java. We're writing robot code in Java. And then you're going to hit Command Robot Skeleton Advanced. That's the one. Okay. The next thing that we're going to be doing is selecting a folder to place the project into. So in this case, it's going to be the GitHub folder. All right. So we're going to do new project folder. We're going to do documents and GitHub. So as long as you download a GitHub desktop and you didn't move anything, your GitHub folder should exist in Documents and GitHub. Next, you're going to give it a project name, so I'm going to call it FRC Project 1, because that sounds cool. And then we're going to check off the option that says create a new folder, because we want to. We don't want to leave all our files created in the GitHub folder, because that's a pain to deal with. Then type in your team number. For me, that's 1923. Go ahead and hit generate project. No need to check off the box that says enable desktop support. And yes, I will make it in the current window. Okay, so what's going to happen now is your project's going to generate. You're going to see all these files over here, and then we're going to be building this new project, okay? So while this build is going on, let's go ahead and figure out how to make a new Git repository for this folder. Now, if you're using Windows, in addition to downloading GitHub Desktop, you might have to install Git. Now, in order to check if you need to install Git, go ahead and click the search bar and type in CMD. And you're going to get command prompt, and click on that and open it up. I've already got one here. So I am going to just go back real quick, ignore this. Okay, so you should see something that looks like this. All right. Now, the first thing you're going to want to do is type in Git. Now, if you get this message, you're good. If you get all this entire wall of text, you're done. You don't need to do anything extra, and you don't need to pause this video and go download something. But if you did not get this, go ahead and just look up download Git, and then follow the instructions for your computer. It's very simple. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we need to find where we stored our project, right? So that's going to be the following command. So you're going to go into the documents folder, that's CD documents. You're going to type that in. And then you're going to go into the GitHub folder. Now, these steps can be applied if you put it somewhere else, so just feel free to change up, the word documents or GitHub as necessary. And then you're going to find FRC Project 1. There we go. So now we're in FRC Project 1. and the only command you need to type is git init. And what this is going to do is turn your WPILib project into a GitHub repository. And you can see everything turn green here, indicating that we have something ready to push. So now we can close command prompt. We're done with that. And we can go back to our friend GitHub desktop. What you're going to do is hit File, and then add a local repository. And we're going to pick the path of our repository. All right, it's going to be Documents, GitHub, and then it's going to be FRC Project 1. We're going to select that, and we're going to add repository. And there we go. We see all of our files added. Now, when you commit, or rather push something to GitHub, right, it's kind of like Google Drive, but it's a really nice Google Drive, right? Because what it's going to do is it's going to ask you for a summary of what exactly you're pushing, right? So let's just call this initial push. Now I'm going to commit this. Oh, maybe I didn't spell initial correctly. Initial push. There we go. And then you can add a description to elaborate if you want further. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to hit commit. And then I'm going to publish this repository. I'm going to call it FRC Project 1, keep it private, and hit publish. And there we go. Just like that, we've got Google Drive functionality, like basically, essentially just Google Drive functionality for our code. And if I go to history, I can see, all right, I've got my initial push, and everything just pushed. And so we're great. And now that's basically the idea of pushing to GitHub, right? If the next time I make a change, GitHub will automatically detect that, okay, there have been changed files. You're going to type out a quick summary of what you changed, hit commit, and then hit push up here. You're going to see a push option up here, and that's it. So we're going to do that at the end of the video, just so you have an idea. I'm just going to make a small change, and you'll see what happens. Okay, so now to this project, right? We can see build successful. If everything's good, then we can continue. So you might be wondering, like, okay, I see all these files. Now I'm a little bit confused, right? Like what am I supposed, where am I supposed to go to? Now, here's the idea, right? You're going to go to source. You're going to go to Java. And immediately, you're going to see 3 files. Now, for the purposes of chapter 3, which is going to be the next chapter, we're going to focus on a file called robot.java, which is this. And you see all these different methods, and you're like, okay, and I see these import statements, I see my package, okay, cool. And we're like, okay, well, what's going on here, right? And so for that, I'd like to introduce you to a diagram. So let's head over to that diagram real quick. Okay, so let's talk about robot.java, because that's really the fundamental file that we're going to be working with for chapter 3, and it's basically going to be one of the most important files you'll ever use when making an FRC project, because this is where you're going to lay out all of your code. So here's this diagram. Now this looks a little bit complicated, but just follow along with me, and I promise you'll understand it. So at the top of the class, right, it's kind of like any other class where you want to initialize and declare your attributes, right? In this case, well, what are the attributes that we care about? It's going to be the motors and the sensors, right? So at the top of the class, you're going to initialize all of your motors and sensors. Then you'll see this method called robot.init. This is where you're going to set up and configure your motors. Now, the setup and configuration of motors, that's going to be talked about in section 3.1, so stay tuned for that, all right? But just know that, all right, it's going to set up and configure my motors. Next, we have robot periodic. Now, this is a repeating loop that repeats every 20 milliseconds, and it runs regardless of the robot state. So whether the robot's in autonomous mode, in teleop mode, or in disabled mode, it runs regardless, all right? So then we have autonomous init. So actually, rather, before I say this, the methods that are in robot.java run according to match flow, right? So let's think about what happens in a match, right? The first thing that happens is autonomous, right? So we have this autonomous init function that's going to run first, which is going to run any initialization things that you want to happen one time, right? So any of the initialized functions that you see here, so robot init, autonomous init, teleop init, disabled init, right? And these all run one time before they enter the periodic loop, okay? So for autonomous init, the second autonomous starts and your robot starts moving by itself, it's going to run this initialize function once. So anything that you want to happen exactly one time, you're going to put in that autonomous init method. All right, then we have autonomous periodic, where it's going to do basically your autonomous routine. So it's going to run all those motors and everything. And then we transition to teleop. And then in teleup, right, because teleup is just starting, we run teleup init. So anything that you want to happen before teleup actually starts, right, you run in teleup init, okay? So that's kind of like your setup, anything that you want to happen, you know, maybe you want to turn something off or turn something on, etc., right? You put that in teleup init. Again, it's going to happen exactly one time, okay? And then the last part of teleup is this teleup periodic, where again, everything's going to run at a 20 millisecond loop, okay? The code's going to keep repeating, all right? Finally, you have disabled init and disabled periodic, which is anything that you want to happen during this disabled period of the robot. So before the robot enters disabled fully, it runs disabled init, and then we run disabled periodic, where anything that you want to happen will run. Now, depending on whether or not you're using the robot, you know, through driver station, or the robot's driver station is communicating with the robot via a match, right? The robot will either power off because the match is over, right? Because you have to go, like when the match ends, you got to go and power off your robot, right? Or the robot will enable again. And if the robot is enabled again, then it's going to go back to whatever state you want it to go in. So whether that's autonomous or teleup, okay? Robot init only runs once, all right? That's when the robot starts up, okay? So, like I said, right? In a match, the robot will automatically enter autonomous, teleup, and disabled. So you don't need to worry about, like, changing that, you know, in driver station, kind of like Griffin showed you in the previous video, okay? In a match, when you plug in your computer, the robot will... There's another computer that your robot connects to, and that computer is responsible for changing the robot from autonomous to teleup to disable, okay? Now, once the match is over, you're required to power off the robot and take the robot off the field, right? And then in that case, this entire flowchart will repeat again, okay? But if you're using just the driver station utility and you're just, you know, powering on the robot at home, no match, right? Robot init's only going to run once. Robot periodic will always run regardless of state. And then depending on what state you choose to enter, whether that's autonomous, you want to run your robot in autonomous, or you want to run the robot in teleup, depending on that, it'll repeat either, you know, the autonomous init, teleup init, etc. So that's sort of the general idea. Now let's take a look at, you know, sort of the code. So let's see if we can find these methods in code. So let me go back to VS Code. Here we are. So here we go. We've got robot init, right? You've got robot periodic. Right? We've got disabled init, disabled periodic. Don't worry so much about these exit methods. They're not really that commonly used, so we're not going to talk about that for the sake of this course. We've got autonomous init. We've got autonomous periodic. We've got teleup init. We've got teleup periodic. And then we have these tests, but we're not going to talk about that for now. We're going to focus on disabled, autonomous, and teleup. Okay, so... Again, you see these two things that are sort of already initialized. We're not going to talk about them now. We'll talk about them in future videos. But these are already objects that are initialized. And so someplace here, right, is where your motor initialization will happen. So motor initialized here. Let's do motors. Okay, so your motors are going to be initialized here. And then in robot init, right, your motors are set up here. Okay? And then robot periodic, we don't really usually do anything. It really just depends on the robot. But really the most important one we're going to go to is teleup periodic, right? Because what happens in teleup, right? We're going to focus on autonomous at a later part in this course. The big focus for now is just going to be teleup, okay? And then in teleup periodic this is where motors do stuff here, right? So that's where, you know, I'm going to turn on my motor and do something, okay? So that's really the big idea about robot.java, right? They have all these different kinds of methods that get used. Now, there are other parts to this project. Like, there is a main, and this is just going to start the robot. So we don't really touch this at all. This is kind of just a WPILib thing that, okay, you know, once we hit the main method, you can start the robot, right? Because every Java class will need a main method to actually, you know, do something and run something, right? Now, there are also these bunch of different files. You don't really have to worry about them now, because you're going to see how all of these sort of connect together eventually when we start and continue on more advanced portions of the course. So now what I want to show you is how to build, simulate, and deploy code. So go ahead and enter that command palette again. So you can either click this red button or hit Control-Shift-P, and then we're going to type in build. So here we see the option for WPILib. Again, anything that you do related to sort of robot stuff, make sure it's prefaced with WPILib. So we're gonna hit that button to do WPILib build robot code. Now our robot code's going to build, and this is essentially just compiling the code to make sure it works. It's not connected to the robot, so this is actually a really good way of making sure your code is actually able to run on the robot without actually deploying it to the robot, all right? Now, if you wanted to deploy code to a robot, you first need to connect to it via Wi-Fi, right? And then finally, you would hit deploy robot code. And here's the option to deploy robot code. Now, if I hit this, right, it's obviously going to fail because I am not connected to a robot at all, right? So if I give this a second here, you can already see it's trying to discover a RoboRio, and there we go, it failed, right? So there's no robot connected, so it's going to fail. Now, for the purposes of this course, and if you don't have a robot handy, what we're going to be using for most of this course is the simulator tool. Now, the simulator tool is where things really get fun, right? So the first thing you're going to want to do is, that I recommend, is open up Driver Station. Now, my driver station's on my other computer, so let's see if I can drag it over here. Okay, there we go. I've got my driver station. And then driver station might open up this thing called shuffleboard. For now, you can ignore that. We're going to close that for now. And don't save the current layout if you get that option. So here I've got my driver station, right? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to enter the command palette and type in simulate. Here I have the option to simulate my robot code. So I'm going to click on that. My code's going to build. And then I have the option of, okay, do I want to use the sim graphical user interface or do I want to use the real driver station? I'm going to hit both just to show you what things look like, okay? So go ahead and hit OK. And then a bunch of things are going to pop up at once, all right? So I'm going to hit allow for this. And then let me get the simulator window popped up over here. And there we go. We have our sim. Now, the sim is where things get a little bit complicated. Now, the main point that you want to look at is kind of this devices section here. Obviously, we haven't written code for any devices yet, so this isn't really going to be helpful. But what is cool is that if I go to driver station now, notice I have connection and robot code, but I don't have a robot. And this is what sim is doing. It is giving me the ability to connect to a fake robot that I can then enable and disable, all right? And that's why we use the simulator, because we can basically analyze what our motors are doing inside the simulator without ever needing to run a robot, right? We can do all of it in the sim, and that's why it's really cool. So in the next video, what we're going to be doing is talking about, well, okay, let's add a motor, and then let's look at it in sim, all right? So in the next video, I'm going to show you guys how to actually code a motor in, and then how to actually look at it within the simulator, all right? And then we're going to actually enable the robot and just see what happens, all right? So thanks so much for watching this video. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. But actually, hold on. Before I go, I need to upload to GitHub, right? I want to show you that. So we did make some changes, right? In our robot.java, we added these comments, right? So I'm just going to hit, type in analyze robot.java. I'm going to commit. And I see the option to push. I'm going to go ahead and push. And so that is all with GitHub, really. It's that simple. That's how we get our Google Drive-like functionality built in. All right, so that brings me to the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.